I never thought the two people I trusted most would destroy me like this. My name is Angus, a 32-year-old software engineer, living my best life in Seattle. 3 weeks from now, I was supposed to marry Stephanie, my gorgeous fiancée, who works as a marketing executive downtown. Everything seemed perfect until my widowed father moved closer to help with wedding preparations. Last night they invited me to dinner, both looking nervous. The way they kept exchanging glances made my stomach turn. Before I tell you how my perfect life shattered that night, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever trusted someone who did not deserve it. Let us dive in. 5 years ago, I lost my mother to an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. The loss devastated both me and my father Richard, but we handled grief differently. I threw myself into my career, climbing the ranks at a promising tech startup while Dad retreated into himself in our family home in Portland. We stayed in touch but grew somewhat distant until 2 years ago when everything changed. I met Stephanie at a cancer research fundraiser. The irony is not lost on me now. She stood out immediately with her confident smile and genuine interest in my stories about Mom. Stephanie worked for a marketing agency that handled the event, and she slipped me her business card as we said goodbye. One coffee date turned into dinner, then weekend trips, and suddenly we were inseparable. Her ambition matched mine, and her compassionate nature reminded me of Mom in the best ways. After 1 year together, I proposed during a sunset hike at Mount Rainier. She cried happy tears, jumping into my arms before I could even finish asking the question. When I called Dad to share the news, he sounded genuinely happy for the first time since Mom died. He asked to meet Stephanie properly, so we drove to Portland for a weekend visit. Their first meeting was slightly awkward but cordial. Dad seemed distant toward her initially, which I chalked up to his general discomfort around new people since becoming a widower. By the end of the weekend, though, they were laughing together over family photos, and Dad even invited us back soon. I remember feeling immense relief that the two most important people in my life were getting along. Our wedding planning kicked into high gear after that. We found a beautiful craftsman-style house in a quiet Seattle neighborhood and pooled our savings for the down payment. We set a date for a spring wedding at a waterfront venue and sent deposits to vendors. Everything was falling perfectly into place. 3 months ago, Dad called with surprising news. He had decided to sell our family home in Portland and move to Seattle to be closer to me. Though startled by this sudden decision, I felt touched that he wanted to reconnect. Part of me hoped having Dad nearby might fill that small hole in my heart that never healed after losing Mom. He explained that with the wedding approaching, he wanted to be more involved in my life again. He found a modern condo just 15 minutes from our new house and moved up with remarkable speed. Within weeks, he had settled in, joined a local gym, and started dropping by unannounced with coffee or lunch. Stephanie was unexpectedly enthusiastic about his arrival, suggesting we invite him to Sunday dinners and wedding planning sessions. "Your dad has such great taste," she commented after he helped choose our wedding flowers, "and he knows so much about wine. We should let him handle the beverage selection for the reception." I agreed, happy to see them bonding, though I found it odd when Dad suggested he and Stephanie meet the caterer without me, since I had an important work deadline. She quickly agreed, touching his arm as she thanked him. Something about that casual touch made me uncomfortable, but I dismissed the feeling as irrational. As weeks passed, subtle changes began appearing like hairline cracks in a foundation. Stephanie started working late 3 or 4 nights a week, claiming her agency had landed a major new client, requiring overtime. She would come home with her hair slightly disheveled, smelling of unfamiliar cologne, claiming the client was an aftershave company doing market research. Dad began calling at strange hours, asking about Stephanie when she would be home, when she had meetings, if she was working late again. He framed these questions as wanting to plan family dinners, but something in his tone felt off. Then came the missing texts. Stephanie had always left her phone unlocked around me, but one day I noticed she had set up facial recognition security. When I casually asked about it, she became defensive, claiming client confidentiality concerns. Several times I glanced over to see her frantically typing messages that disappeared from her screen when I approached. Dad started showing up looking years younger, new haircut, designer clothes, even a subtle tan from spending time at my new building's rooftop pool. He lost 15 pounds and bought a sleek new watch that must have cost thousands. When I complimented it, he mumbled something about treating myself after the house sale. The most confusing discovery came when Stephanie started wearing a delicate diamond bracelet I had never seen. When asked about it, she hesitated before claiming it was a work gift from a jewelry client. I later checked her client roster. There was no jewelry company listed. Around this time, my sleep deteriorated. Nightmares plagued me, vague scenarios of betrayal and loss that left me gasping awake at 3 a.m., reaching for Stephanie only to find her side of the bed empty. She would claim to be in the guest bathroom with stomach issues, but her phone was always clutched in her hand. At a backyard barbecue with friends, my college roommate Marcus pulled me aside after watching Stephanie and Dad talking quietly by the grill. "Hey man, is it just me, or are your dad and fiancée weirdly close?" he asked. "The way they whisper together feels intimate." I laughed it off, blaming pre-wedding stress for making everyone crazy. But later that night, I walked into the kitchen to find them whispering intensely, standing too close. They jumped apart when I entered Dad, suddenly very interested in the contents of our refrigerator, while Stephanie busied herself wiping already clean counters. The next day, Stephanie suggested postponing our honeymoon to Greece, claiming work obligations. "Maybe we can go in the fall instead." Dad mentioned he might be traveling this summer too. Maybe we could coordinate something with him later. That was the moment a cold weight settled in my stomach, impossible to ignore any longer. The weight of suspicion grew heavier each day as coincidences piled up too high to dismiss. The first hard evidence appeared innocuously. I borrowed Dad's car to pick up wedding invitations when my car was in the shop. Reaching into the glove compartment for a parking receipt, I found another receipt for a downtown boutique hotel, dated 2 weeks earlier, for a room with a king bed. The room service bill included 2 steaks and a bottle of champagne. Dad had told me he was visiting old friends in Tacoma that weekend. Stephanie's grocery trips became suspicious next. Who needs 2 hours to buy milk and bread? One Tuesday evening, she grabbed her purse, claiming we were out of coffee and several other essentials. She returned 120 minutes later, with only a small bag containing coffee and cookies, her lipstick freshly applied. When I asked what took so long, she mentioned running into an old friend from college. The evidence mounted Dad's collar smelling of Stephanie's distinctive perfume when he hugged me. A text notification appearing on Stephanie's phone from Richter that she quickly deleted when she saw me notice. Dad creating increasingly elaborate reasons to stop by our house, when he knew I would be working but Stephanie would be home. Finally, I decided to investigate, rather than torture myself with uncertainty. I told both of them I had an all-day training session at work, but instead parked down the street from Stephanie's office building. At 11:30, she emerged and walked not to her usual lunch spot, but to her car. I followed at a safe distance as she drove directly to Dad's condo building. She parked in visitor parking, checked her makeup in the mirror, and practically skipped to the entrance. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone to document the time, 11:45 a.m. For 2 excruciating hours, I sat watching the building entrance part of me, still hoping for an innocent explanation. Perhaps they were planning a wedding surprise. Maybe Dad was having health problems they were keeping from me. Any alternative felt better than the betrayal my gut screamed was happening. At 1:45 p.m., Stephanie emerged with Dad right behind her. In the parking garage, thinking they were unobserved, they embraced not a friendly hug, but a passionate kiss that lasted far too long. Dad ran his hands through her hair while she pressed herself against him. I felt physically ill, but forced myself to take photos, knowing I would need evidence for the conversation to come. That night, I began a methodical investigation. I checked our joint credit card statements and discovered matching hotel charges on nights Stephanie claimed to be working late, all at hotels near Dad's regular haunts. Using data recovery software, I retrieved dozens of deleted texts, between them going back over 3 months' messages filled with explicit content and declarations of love that made me physically nauseous. The most damning evidence came from our cloud storage. Stephanie had accidentally synced her phone photos without realizing our accounts were linked. There, I found selfies of them together in bed, in hotel rooms, even one in our house on our couch when I had been away at a conference. The timestamps created a timeline of betrayal, stretching back to our engagement party. I discovered love letters in a desk drawer. Stephanie thought I never opened handwritten notes from Dad, describing their undeniable connection and how they were meant to find each other. One letter mentioned how much he loved her taking risks by sneaking away during family dinners to pleasure each other in the guest bathroom while everyone else watched football. The final confirmation came when I overheard Stephanie on the phone while she thought I was in the shower. "Richard, we have to tell him soon. The wedding is in 3 weeks. I know it will destroy him, but we cannot keep living this lie. I love you too. Yes, more than I ever loved him." The bathroom fan covered the sound of my breakdown. The silent screams, the punched wall, the collapse onto cold tile. When I emerged, 30 minutes later, I had cried all the tears I would allow myself. Now it was time for strategy, not emotion. I met with a lawyer the next morning, securing my financial assets and removing Stephanie from our joint accounts, except for one checking account I left untouched, as not to raise suspicion. I moved important documents to a safe deposit box and backed up all evidence to encrypted storage. Marcus agreed to help letting me crash at his place after the confrontation I knew must come. Rather than collapse under betrayal, I decided to take control of the narrative. They had stolen my trust, and future they would not steal my dignity too. I chose a Thursday night for the confrontation. My hands trembled slightly as I texted both of them, feeling stressed about wedding planning. Could use a nice dinner with my 2 favorite people. Morton's Steakhouse. At 8 p.m., they both replied with enthusiasm, Stephanie, adding she had big news to share. I arrived early, selecting a corner table with good acoustics and minimal escape routes. I placed my phone in recording mode, hidden by the breadbasket. The maitre d' knew me from business dinners and agreed to my unusual request for absolute privacy in our section. Dad arrived first, looking younger than his 58 years, in an expensive new blazer. He hugged me with what seemed like genuine affection, making everything more confusing. Stephanie arrived 10 minutes later, wearing a dress I had never seen, hair freshly styled, nervously clutching her purse. "You both look nice," I said carefully. "Special occasion." They exchanged quick glances before Stephanie replied, "Just wanted to look good for a nice dinner with my favorite guys." I ordered an $800 bottle of champagne, raising eyebrows from both of them. "What are we celebrating?" Dad asked, loosening his collar. "Honesty," I replied, maintaining eye contact until he looked away. "Family. The ties that bind us. The promises we make to those we claim to love." The champagne arrived, and I raised my glass. "To transparency. May the truth set us all free." Their nervous sips betrayed their discomfort. "So Stephanie mentioned having news to share," I prompted after the waiter took our order. Another glance between them. Dad nodded slightly, and Stephanie reached for her water glass hand, visibly trembling. "Actually, Angus, your father and I wanted to talk to you about something important," she began. "How interesting," I interrupted, pulling out my phone and placing it on the table. "Because I wanted to discuss something important too." I swiped to the first photo, them kissing in the parking garage, and turned the screen toward them. Like this. The color drained from both their faces simultaneously. Dad reached for his champagne and drained it in one gulp, while Stephanie began stammering excuses. "That is not what it looks like," she attempted. "Really? Then perhaps these will be easier to explain." I began a methodical presentation of evidence. The hotel receipts, the text messages, the love letters. With each new piece, their denials grew weaker, until finally they sat in defeated silence. "How long?" I asked, my voice steady despite the hurricane inside me. Dad spoke first, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 months. "Since when exactly?" I pressed, needing the full truth. Stephanie looked at her hands. "Since the engagement party." The engagement party. when Dad had given a tearful toast about welcoming Stephanie to our family. When he had hugged me and said Mom would be proud. The same night, apparently, he had seduced my fiancée or been seduced by her. The distinction hardly mattered now. Were you ever going to tell me, or just let me go through with the wedding? Their confessions spilled out in fragments. They had planned to tell me tonight, to call off the wedding. They claimed the affair began innocently consoling each other over wedding, stress bonding over shared interests, one drink too many after a cake tasting I had missed due to work. We never meant for it to happen, Stephanie insisted, tears streaming down her face. It just did. Love is unexpected sometimes, Dad added, reaching for her hand across the table. I laughed then, a hollow sound that silenced nearby tables. Love. Is that what you call betraying your son? Your future husband? The truth emerged in painful detail as I continued questioning them. Stephanie admitted she had initially been attracted to my financial stability and promising career. But with Richard, there is this passion I never felt with you, she explained, twisting the knife deeper. Dad revealed his own disturbing motivation. Every time I look at you, I see your mother. It has been torture since she died. But Stephanie, she makes me feel young again, alive. For once I have something that is just mine, not a reflection of what I lost. The most devastating revelation came about their financial betrayal. They had been gradually emptying our joint savings account, diverting funds to a shared account they had established. Dad had contacted a realtor about selling our house, the house I had purchased mainly with my savings, claiming to have power of attorney to act on my behalf. We were going to split everything fairly, Dad insisted, as if that made their deception acceptable. The final blow came when Stephanie admitted to a pregnancy scare the previous month. We thought I might be carrying Richard's baby. That is when we realized we had to come clean. The restaurant around us continued its elegant routine, waiters delivering overpriced steaks, couples celebrating anniversaries, business deals being closed over wine, while my world imploded in slow motion. I stood slowly, placing my napkin on the table. Congratulations on your relationship. I wish you both exactly what you deserve. Stephanie grabbed my arm. Angus, please. We never meant to hurt you. Her touch triggered something primal in me. I turned to face them both, my voice controlled but carrying to nearby tables. You slept with my father for 3 months while planning our wedding. You stole my money. You were going to sell my house. What exactly did you think would happen? Dad attempted damage control. Son, we can discuss this privately. No, I said firmly. Privacy is a privilege you lost when you betrayed me. You want to be together? Fine. But you will do it under the harsh light of truth, not wrapped in comfortable lies. Stephanie began sobbing dramatically, drawing attention from the entire restaurant. I am sorry. Please forgive us. My final words to them were measured and clear. I do not hate either of you. Hate requires emotional investment I will never again waste on you. What I feel is pity for two people so broken they could only find happiness by destroying someone who loved them. The wedding is canceled. Do not contact me again. Ever. I walked out, leaving them with the $800 dinner bill and the weight of their actions witnessed by a restaurant full of strangers. Walking away that night was the hardest and most important step of my life. The next morning, I began the strategic process of reclaiming my power and rebuilding what they had destroyed. First came legal protection. The evidence I gathered proved financial fraud. My lawyer filed emergency orders, freezing the remaining assets and documenting their unauthorized attempts to sell my property. The judge granted a temporary restraining order based on the harassment that began when they realized I had exposed them. Next came social consequences. I drafted a calm, factual email to our wedding guests, explaining the cancellation due to profound betrayal by both my fiancé and father. I attached no images but made clear that they had been having an affair for months. Within hours, their phones exploded with messages from disgusted friends and family. Dad's business partners at his architectural firm were particularly disturbed by his behavior. 2 major clients withdrew projects, citing character concerns. The scandal rippled through professional circles, where integrity still mattered. Stephanie's marketing agency, built on trust and reputation management, placed her on leave when 3 clients threatened to leave after hearing the story. I changed the locks and security system on my house, having locksmiths come the same day I sent the email to wedding guests. When they both showed up separately to explain and collect belongings, security cameras captured their frustrated attempts to enter with now useless keys. The emotional wreckage required different tools. I found a therapist, specializing in betrayal trauma, attending twice-weekly sessions, to process the catastrophic loss of my 2 closest relationships. Simultaneously, in group therapy, I met others who had experienced similar betrayals, none quite as twisted as mine, but the patterns of deception and justification were eerily familiar. The people who hurt you will try to make their choices about you, your shortcomings, your neglect, your flaws, my therapist explained. But this was never about you. This was about their broken moral compasses and selfish desires. I rebuilt financial security by closing joint accounts and establishing new ones at different banks. The honeymoon funds became a solo journey of healing, 2 weeks hiking the mountains of New Zealand, physically challenging myself while finding perspective in vast ancient landscapes that made human betrayal seem small against geological time. Most surprisingly, new allies emerged from unexpected places. Dad's sister Linda, my aunt whom I rarely saw, called from Arizona. "What Richard did is unforgivable," she stated plainly. "Your mother would be heartbroken. I want you to know that family is still in your corner, even if your father failed you." More shocking was Sarah, Stephanie's maid of honor, who arrived at my door in tears. I suspected something was happening, but had no proof. She confessed. She swore she was just getting cold feet when I questioned her. "I am so sorry I did not try harder to warn you. My company proved unexpectedly supportive. When my performance inevitably suffered, my manager approved a month of paid personal leave rather than the 2-week standard policy allowed. Colleagues organized meal deliveries during the worst weeks and never pressed for details I was not ready to share. Mom's old friends, women who had known me since childhood, formed a protective circle of wisdom and practical support. Martha, her best friend, spent a weekend helping me pack away Stephanie's remaining things and sage the house. "Your mother once told me you were her greatest achievement," she said as we worked. She was right. The strength you are showing would make her prouder than you know. The most difficult test came 3 months after the restaurant confrontation. Dad and Stephanie appeared unannounced at my office, waiting by my car in the parking garage. Their relationship had apparently soured under public scrutiny. Both looked haggard and desperate. "Angus, please." Stephanie began stepping toward me. "We made a terrible mistake. Richard and I are over." I realized what I threw away. I held up my hand, stopping her approach. "No, you do not get to rewrite this story, now that consequences have arrived." Dad tried next, his voice breaking. "Son, I have lost everything, my reputation, my business is suffering, even my health. I need my family." Looking at him, truly seeing the man rather than the idealized father I had created, I felt an unexpected calm. "You chose this path knowing exactly what it would cost. I am not responsible for rescuing you from your choices. Can you ever forgive us?" Stephanie whispered. "Forgiveness is not the issue," I replied. "Trust is. And trust, once shattered this completely, cannot be restored. I wish you both peaceful lives, far away from mine. This is the last conversation we will ever have." I entered my car and drove away, watching them grow smaller in my rearview mirror. 2 diminished figures standing alone in a cold parking garage. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt no pain watching them fade from view. 1 year has passed since the night my world collapsed at Morton's Steakhouse. The journey from devastation to rebuilding taught me lessons I never wanted to learn, but now value beyond measure. The initial months brought overwhelming grief, not just for my lost relationship and future, but for the death of family as I had understood it. Anger followed, burning hot enough to consume me if I let it. The temptation to seek revenge beyond legal consequences was strong, but ultimately I chose a different path. I sold the house we had bought together, unable to create new memories in spaces tainted by betrayal. My new apartment sits on the 18th floor of a downtown building with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. The city lights reflecting on water remind me nightly that beauty still exists, despite pain. The wedding funds redirected to therapy proved the wisest investment of my life. Through professional guidance, I learned that forgiveness was not about absolving them, but freeing myself from the weight of bitterness. I could acknowledge the profound wrong done to me while refusing to let it define my future. 6 months after the betrayal, I began volunteering with a support group for survivors of relationship trauma. Helping others navigate their own paths forward became unexpected healing. Witnessing strength emerge from broken places reminded me weekly that humans are remarkably resilient when we support each other. My passion for photography, abandoned during the busy engagement period, returned stronger than before. Weekends now find me capturing landscapes across the Pacific Northwest. My images selling in small galleries and online. This creative outlet transformed pain into something beautiful, a metaphor for the entire healing journey. Last month, I encountered Stephanie unexpectedly at a coffee shop. She looked startled, then hopeful when she saw me. The woman who once consumed my thoughts now seemed like a stranger, familiar but disconnected from my current life. We exchanged brief pleasantries, her eyes revealing unhappiness despite her forced smile. I felt neither joy nor sorrow at her apparent struggles, just a neutral recognition that her life path no longer impacted mine. Through mutual connections, I learned Dad had moved to Florida after health problems and financial setbacks. His sister mentioned he had tried therapy briefly but quit when the therapist made everything about his relationship with his parents. Some patterns refused to change. The strangest part of healing has been recognizing that I can feel genuine empathy for their brokenness without reopening my wounds. Their actions reflected their damaged internal landscapes, not my worthiness of love and loyalty. Today I am dating cautiously, but optimistically. My standards for relationship health have transformed. Transparency and consistent integrity matter more than surface attraction or shared interests. Trust builds slowly now, but on a foundation of genuine connection, rather than desperate hope or convenient comfort. The family I lost has been replaced by one I consciously chose: friends who showed up during crisis, coworkers who became confidants, neighbors who ensured I never ate alone during those first devastating weeks. These connections, built on mutual respect rather than obligation, proved stronger than blood ties that failed their most basic test. The most profound lesson came unexpectedly. Happiness is not the absence of pain, but the presence of meaning. By facing the worst betrayal imaginable without losing my own integrity, I discovered strength I never knew I possessed. That knowledge cannot be taken away, no matter what future challenges arise. If you have experienced betrayal by those you trusted most, know this: the path forward exists even when you cannot yet see it. Healing comes not in dramatic moments, but in small daily choices to honor your own worth. The people who broke your trust do not deserve the power to break your future too. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story helped you feel less alone in your journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming life's darkest challenges. Remember to share this video with someone who might need to know they can survive what feels unsurvivable. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes losing what you thought you needed opens the door to finding what you truly deserve.